Jesse Kirshbaum, welcome to the Carrie Croft Show. Remote style. You're in Miami.
I am. I would say I wish I was there at the beautiful studio in the backdrop, but I do
You'd be,
not be. I'm not upset that I'm in Miami this time of year.
it'd
It's
be a bold
awesome.
faced lie if you said that, right? A bold faced
Well,
lie.
I think you got to be able to hold two ideas at the same time. I do wish I was in that beautiful studio looking at all that great art, sitting with you in person in the same room. But I'm also really glad that right after this session, we're going to be able to go out into 81 degrees and sunny weather and contemplate if I'm going to go to the beach this weekend or not.
When's the last time you were even in Ohio?
Last time I want to say was for an Abercrombie and Fitch holiday party where I booked a bunch of talent for it.
Okay, got it. Okay, so for the folks at home who don't know who you are yet, I met you at the Summit Series. I was there actually by myself last year. And you don't know this, but my bag got lost. And so I had to wear the same outfit, like meeting all these cool people and like networking. I had like the same ratty airport outfit on the entire time. I just didn't let it bother me, but I was like, this is amazing. It took 2 weeks to get my bag back, but I digress. And I remember standing by this coffee company. It was a coffee brand. And you came walking through with somebody. And we literally had a 4-minute interaction. And I made sure to ask for your Instagram because I was like, this guy has something. I don't know what this is, but this is the reason why you come to the summit is a guy like this. You were authentic, you were dynamic, and you stayed with me. And so I put you on my shelf and I'm like, someday I'm going to reach out to him and we are going to be friends. He just doesn't know it yet. So fast forward, what, a year later ish? And I reach out to you on DM. I'm like, hey, don't know if you remember me. Met you at Summit. You want to come on my show? And here we are, right?
Well, I'm a big believer in Summit Magic. I've been going to Summit since the first boat, and I remember meeting you. I remember that little area that we were all in with strong coffee and kind of some infrared and massage and light meditation stuff. So this was a cool area, and the CEO of Summit was there, and I was strolling through with my client, who is the violinist Charles Yang, who's like kind of a prodigy musician and was performing at Summit Series, and he had just won, or I think he recently, right after that, won 3 Grammys for his group and for Best Classical Artist in 2022. So it was definitely a moment that I remembered, and I was like honored that you collected me as one of your future friends. And I
Yes.
definitely felt the energy. I took down your information too, and we stayed in touch. So look at that. Fast forward, here we are. You always got to embrace. I think one of the pillars of Summit Series, it used to be at least, embracing serendipity,
Yeah.
and here we go.
And I was just going to say that it was very serendipitous. And first of all, it's a lesson for people to get out there and actually use your intuition to really understand the power of meeting people and truly having organic connections. That's number one, because I think a lot of people don't do that and they're nervous and they're afraid or whatever. So that's A. But B, when I went home and I looked through your Instagram, that's when I was like, oh shit, oh hell, here we go, here we fucking go. So your Instagram is literally, so I am a hip hop lover. Like I've told you, I grew up with, Crisscross and Biggie and Tupac. I still think he's alive somewhere. Like I can't even fathom the fact that he's really not here. He's a prophet and I have him all over my house. And hip hop just is like, it's such a part of my upbringing. And I'm like, this guy was cool, got him on Instagram. So I'm looking, and you literally are with so many hip hop artists and just cool people doing cool shit. And I'm like, oh my God. So when we started talking recently, I told you that one of the things on my bucket list is to be in a rap video, which now that I'm getting older, getting up there, I feel like that's probably, but I'm not going to give up on the dream. But then you told me I was in a rap video.
That was my first experience in the music business. I just loved hip hop like you. I fell in love with it in the 90s. Uh, Living in New York, I just thought it was the epitome of what I was about. It was entrepreneurial. It was swagger. I just was obsessed with it when I discovered it in like high school. And then there was a bad boy, East Coast, West Coast battle going on. And Puff Daddy was like the king of New York. And I was just like, could not get enough of it. And then when I'm in high school, I'm throwing all the parties for my high school. I'm in charge of all the football kegs. I'm the president of the student body. I'm doing all this stuff in music, but like just tangentially by bringing play or soundtracks or mixtapes or putting music on the announcements and assemblies. And then all of a sudden, a girlfriend of mine said, "We're doing my sister is doing a Puff Daddy music video. Would you want to be in it?" And I was blown away. I was like, this is amazing. And they paid me to be an extra in It's All About the Benjamins. And I was in high school. I was like a senior. And at this construction site in New Jersey, we shot from 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. the whole night. Puffy was like super paranoid because of all that was going on. Biggie had just gotten killed, and there was just a the rap battle was very heightened at the time, and yet I'm in the mix and I have, no shame. I can walk up to anybody. It's like kind of one of my superpowers. So I'm talking to Little Kim and I'm talking to the Locks and I've got my dyed blonde hair and my visor off to the side, like before Eminem. Like before Eminem even existed in the scene, I had dyed blonde hair and a visor and there's a couple cuts where you can actually even see me in this like very aggressive mosh pit. But this video ended up going on to be like one of the greatest rap songs of all time, especially for New York, and an anthem. And by the time I got to college, like it was just people from Wisconsin had never even met anybody like from New York, let alone in a rap video. So yeah, I was just obsessed with hip hop and being in a rap video, like as an extra, as a dancer, as somebody that just loved the sport so much, was pretty much unbelievable. It set my whole career onto a path. Like pretty soon after that, I realized
Right.
I'm going to change my major in college. I started as a political science major. I didn't know what I was going to do, but then I was like, wow, I want to be in music. Like this is the coolest business in the world. And I changed my major, got into the business school at Wisconsin, and just pretty much knew that I was going into the music business and just had to figure out any way I could how to get back to a moments like the Puff Daddy music video that was my first taste of the business.
And like when I go on your Instagram profile and I'm looking through, I'm like, what the hell? This is unbelievable. So like when you started in this business, kind of walk me through like who was your first big act that you were like super pumped about, and like how did like let's talk about some of these hip hop artists that you've worked with.
So I was 22 and I thought electronic music was going to be out of college. I had this thesis that electronic music was going to be the craze. So I called every electronic record label in New York, and eventually one hired me and put me in as the office manager, and I was basically making coffee and delivering mail and loving it. But I started to quickly realize that the electronic record business was not much of a business. They were giving away more records than they were selling. And I just didn't think this was going to end up being a good sector of the career. Plus, I wasn't as passionate about the music in electronic and house and disco and as I am in hip hop. And so I was going to go to get a law degree. And I was starting to study for the LSATs. And a family friend was like, you know what? You're in the mix. You're already throwing parties in New York. You love hip hop. You should try to be an agent. And so I called up every agency. I got this like kind of temp 1 week trial password to a company called Celebrity Access, and basically called up every agency in the book and was like, I want to work in the agency business. Can you give me a job? And finally, one company hired me, and then another company pretty quickly brought me in and said, we just got funding. We're in a great position. I'll let you skip the mailroom, Jesse, if you can sign acts, right? You don't have to be an assistant. You can be my assistant, and then you won't have to do the whole William Morris, CAA, big agency thing of giving your whole 20s away to learning the business. We'll let you sign acts if you can really sign artists. So I'm looking at this space like, wow, I can just become an agent pretty early on if I can find an act to sign with me. So I just started calling artists and trying to sign them. And I called this group the Yin Yang Twins. I'm 22. I called the Yin Yang Twins. They had just got this little song, "Ay Ya Ya Ya," and I called DJ Smurf, who was their manager, and he was in College Park, Atlanta, and I convinced, he was like, "Look, we'll work together, but I'm not going to sign with you. You're not going to be. I won't be an exclusive client of yours." So I was like, "Okay," but they took my call, and then I tried to call Sean Paul. He had this song "Give Me the Light." He was like a reggae artist, the dance hall artist coming out of Jamaica, but like really
I
buzzing in New
love Sean.
York. He
I
was
love
getting like $4,000 a night. He was like his first song, "Give Me the Light." I called him and I called him and I got his agent to call me back and said, "Hey, we'll take a meeting with you." And I met with him and we went to a Korean restaurant, and I went out to lunch and they said, "Listen, we're not going to sign with you, but if you bring us opportunities, we'll take them." And I ended up like bringing him an opportunity to go to Dubai, and we became friends. And 20 years later, we still have a relationship with his whole camp, from Steve to Jerome to Jeremy, even Sean and his brother Corey. But then, so I was like a little discouraged, but two no's. But I was getting closer. And then a group called the Clips, whose record is hanging right above me. They had a song called "Grindin'." It was Pharrell's first single on his new label, Star Trek, and it like just sounded so weird and so cool. And I started calling them, and I was like, "Who's your agent? I want to be your agent." And essentially, they were on this tour, and they were like, "Our tour's a mess. We're with the wrong venues, and we're on this kind of street tour promoting our single. If you fix the tour, Jesse, we'll sign with you." And I worked around the clock on the weekend. Me and my boss, he taught me everything at the time, how to do it. And we rerouted the tour in different types of venues. And the Clips ended up signing with me as their agent. And I was 22. And their single ended up taking off on the pop charts. And then we went on tour with Nelly. They put out an album. The album went top 10. I think actually the album went number 2 on the album charts in the country. And Nelly called, and we were on tour with Nelly in arenas with Al Heyman, who's like a legendary boxing promoter, but at the time he was a hip hop promoter. And then Jay-Z called and said, "Hey, would you want to come on tour in Europe?" And I went on the tour with the Clips. And at this point, I'm like 23 on tour with Jay-Z in Europe, all over the world. And then we got a third call, which was 50 Cent. And he was just like the hottest thing in the world. And his manager said, "Would you want to come on tour with 50 Cent in colleges?" And so then we did a college tour with 50 Cent through Chris Lighty and Violator. And it was just an amazing way to meet so many people in the business and to jumpstart my career. And, at 23, I had already had like a top 10 artist. I was signing more acts. I had been on tour all over the world. And really understanding so many facets of the music business. As an agent, you're meeting the record label, you're meeting the promoters, you're meeting brands. We did a deal with Tommy Hilfiger and Peter Paul Scott at the time. We went on like a spring break Tommy Hilfiger series. and then you're meeting all of these different promoters and other artists that you're on shows with, all over the world. So it was a really good kind of first learning experience in my early 20s, to see the music business from that perspective, especially a hip hop business that was just building kind of what its live music looked like, right? Hip hop and live music wasn't a big thing. And when I started my company, I realized that that was an opportunity. And 10 years, 8 years later, when I started my company, I had an artist that agreed to do a much bigger, more elaborate live show. And it really made a big difference for that artist's career and for my career when I was starting new.
Sorry, I just died because I mean that whole thing right there, it was just like my dream come true. Like on so every single artist you named, and like Sean Paul, the song "Like Glue" is like
Yeah.
one of my all like when I want to like dopamine hit and like hype myself up in my car, I like play "Like Glue." I mean, it's like, every art. I mean, forget about it. Jay Z, all of that. That is so incredible. So I have a real dumb question, but what about the groupies? How was that? Like, was it like mayhem all the time and just like managing the hype and like what was that like constantly?
Mayhem. Mayhem. I mean, on tour with, I really started to see it on tour with Jay Z, like in Europe. It was like an organized operation. Like when you've got Jay Z, Pharrell, and a baby band like the Clips, like all buzzing and traveling Europe, it became like a very well organized operation. How from city to city, what it looked like in the lobby of these hotels. It was just unbelievable. So, yeah, I mean, you navigate it. You actually become friends with some of these people along the way. Some of them are promoters, some of them are connectors, some of them show up in future and past lives. Um, and then, yeah, when you're traveling from city to city, and it's an outlet, it's really wild to see. I mean, I think there's real fans, and I think there's a real business in super serving the super fans. The groupies are a whole different thing. Um, you know, I in the beginning was kind of enamored by just the sport of it. Eventually, I'm more focused on the business, or the stress is higher as you do become more successful. You start to focus on other things than necessarily all of the kind of hoopla that comes with it. But yeah, I think each city is there was definitely a lot of groupies in every city
I would have given
across the world.
to like be a voyeur on that. So how long was this run? And like when did you start to sort of, I don't know if it's run out of steam, or when did you start to in like when did the new career start to become sort of on the crossroads? How old were you?
Well, I took a big chance. I started to see some changes happening, and I went into the video game world in my late 20s and moved to LA and worked at a video game company that was selling a handheld device out of Sweden. I did a launch event for them in the UK where I booked Pharrell and the Clips and Busta Rhymes and Mini Me, and we had all these different Jamiroquai and Sting were all there, and we did this kind of product launch in the UK. And I met the founders of this video game company, and the founder said, "We're going to launch in America." They had bought one of my friends' companies, the promoter that I'd worked with in Europe, and ultimately they said, "If you, would you want to help us in our American division, leading entertainment partnerships and being the director of entertainment marketing?" And so they gave us all stock. They gave Pharrell stock. They gave, it was a big to do, the launch event in UK. And when they came to America, I ended up moving into their company in Beverly Hills and working in entertainment and video games for 2 years and really seeing this kind of digital entertainment revolution that was coming. Like the music business when I started my career was just changing and in a hard place. I was like a Napster baby
So was I.
in college, and so like what happened was just a downward spiral from there, where like an industry that was just so profitable, selling CDs for $20 by the boatload, that was just huge profit margins, to all of a sudden like almost going broke and losing control of distribution. It was an ugly place, the music business, for a long time. And live was a very healthy sector of it, which is where I was focused on, and partnerships was also a great place. But I started to see that like these digital companies had optimism and was building new IP and felt like it was the forefront of where things could go. And so working in LA at a startup that had raised a bunch of money and was doing big deals, really kind of taught me that this was the evolution. And when that company ultimately folded and ended up imploding, I moved back to New York, had a basically a quarter life crisis, as I like to define it, and then decided to start my company, Nue Agency, and do it a new way. And that was the kind of impetus for my business. A friend of mine let me work on his couch in Harlem, and to help him with his only management client. He had a really cool company called DigiWax that was doing marketing for musicians. But he had this one client that he was promoting, that he was managing and had a partnership with on a record label. And this artist was named Mims. And he was like, just work on my couch, start your company, and you can help me with Mims. And we ultimately ended up getting Mims. He had a song, This Is Why I'm Hot.
Yeah.
And the song ended up going number one on the pop charts. He was my first client at Nue Agency. And we ended up doing deals with him and Microsoft. We renamed him Microsoft Mims. And it just started becoming like a, a thing where Nue Agency started getting on the map. And then the next client I signed was this artist, Wale, who I was representing. I became friendly with his manager on Friendster many years back. I'd seen Wale on MySpace. Wale was interested in doing a better live performance, which is what I referenced a little earlier. He wanted to put a go-go band behind him. And I was always going to conferences and kind of keeping my finger on the pulse. And I'd seen that there was a need for hip hop artists that would do a live band experience. And the fact that Wale had a go-go band in mind to back him on college shows and on tour just was a big differentiation point. So I started representing Wale, and we started playing shows, and we started getting a lot of acclaim. And all of a sudden, he got a record deal with Interscope, and he ended up signing with Rock Nation. And so I'm in these really great circles with Wale. He's putting out Chillin'. I got him on main stage at Coachella because he was this live experience. Like that year, his freshman year in the sport, basically in hip hop, it was him, Drake, and Kid Cudi on the cover of GQ as like rap's next superstars. And Wale is just a really connected, interesting guy. He can introduce me to J. Cole, and I ended up starting to become J. Cole's manager. I'm sorry, J. Cole's agent for the early days of the warm up. He actually thanks me in his first album credits. And then then Wale's manager introduced me to Mike Posner, and I became Mike Posner's agent when he was at Duke. And then Mike Posner introduced me to Big Sean, and I was Big Sean's agent. And then, over time at Nue Agency, I ran it as a booking agency for about 7 years, 8 years. And I was everybody from White Panda's agency of record, who ended up spawning Griffin, who's just massive today, to 2 a.m. Club, which is now Mark Bassey's got a solo career out of, to Action Bronson's agent, to Logic's first agent. So we worked with all of these different artists. At one point, it was like 300 shows a month, like 25 shows a weekend on average. And yeah, it was a independent booking agency representing a lot of the cool hip hop artists. And we were doing things in the college market, we were doing things in the technology market, we were doing things with the live experience. And yeah, we just got a good reputation as being this indie agency in culture.
Were you
And
24/7 all the time? Just go, go, go?
this era was very challenging because it was very competitive, right? I had the big agencies constantly trying to take my clients, and it's very hard if you're a 24, 25-year-old kid, and somebody offers you a Kanye West tour, even if they're not going to give it to you. It's really tough to compete in that regard. You kind of have to see if the grass is really greener. It isn't, right? Now that I've seen this space, it's really about who's going to give you the most attention. But there was some issues about the bigger agencies. And then also it was just, yeah, I mean, calls at all hours. If things go right, you're not getting a call. But if things go wrong, it's a 2 a.m. phone call, that the artist's ground transportation isn't set up properly. They need a hoodie. They're cold. Whatever it ended up being. Like, it was just nonstop phones ringing. I tell you, I looked, you probably can see photos. I looked a lot older at 30 than I do at 44. It was just a different era of stress. And it just ended up feeling like I was just constantly on defense and offense at the same time. And, it was all hours of all nights and all weekends and phone calls from artists that just had, kind of unusual requests and unable to be scheduled. That would just show up on your, phone, whatever day, time. I could be at a wedding and there'd be a problem, and it just, would just take control of my afternoon because it's not so easy to extinguish these fires.
What's the most ridiculous request? You have one that you remember?
Yeah, I had booked a international tour, a really hard international tour for this artist from Baltimore. He was so talented. He was so connected. Everybody was starting to talk about this guy. I'd put him on tours that were just outrageous, like Rock the Bells. We were really building this artist. It felt really, really, really good. And I put together this tour for him in Europe, and 15 shows. We got paid. He got paid. The money was sent to him, and it was time to go to the airport. And he was shows were all set up, and it was starting to become some problems, right? He was starting to flake on things. He was not showing up to shows, which is really red flag. But we had this big tour, and he was a little self-sabotaging. And I don't know if it was imposter syndrome. We never really got to the bottom of it. There was a little bit of a power struggle in the teams about management, but ultimately, we're at the airport. He's at the airport ready to go on this big international tour, and he couldn't go. He didn't want to go. And I was trying to understand why. You asked to go on this tour, you took the money, we got you the tour, and basically God told him not to go. And once God was involved, I just said, well, if I let it go right on the spot. Like, that was like the first time God was thrown in my face as a potential deterrent
Right.
for, and God's telling him not to go, even if
Who am
all
I to?
logical reasons. I just at that point said that's fine, and that was the end of us working together.
I'm not messing with
And
God.
but I wasn't gonna get a hex put on my whole family from trying to push him to go. But things like that come up from time to time. That was one of those weird ones where everything said go except God. Um, and I wasn't gonna argue with God.
You know,
I moved on.
it's funny. That kind of made me think about Post Malone for some reason because in today's world, you can look at TikTok and you see all these clips from shows and stuff. And he was just on Howard Stern, and he seemed a little unhinged, and he's had some serious accidents on stage and some really random stuff going on. But when you think about that, these are just humans, and that's a big thing to be consistent and to play and to do your thing all the time. And if you're either drinking a ton or using substances or inconsistent or whatever, that has to be managing freaking herding cats. But if you don't
It
show up
can
for a
be.
show, it's That's a huge deal. It's a huge
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah, you're letting fans down, you're letting promoters down, word spreads that you're inconsistent. Your reputation is everything. There's million artists, literally a million artists out there. In 2025, it's like being projected there'll be a million artists. So you have to be differentiated. You have to show up. You have to work hard. You have to be reliable in order to get the slot. Otherwise, it can easily go to somebody else. And that goes for every endorsement deal, concert, festival slot. People don't want to work with people that are unreliable or inconsistent.
Oh. So Nue Agency, what you're doing today is very cool. And so my understanding, it's like the intersection of obviously music, technology, brands, but the way you really colored it in for me the other day is when you talked about the Slick Rick scenario. And I think that's a
Yeah.
great way to kind of help people understand like what does the agency do?
Well, I changed my business model from representing artists to representing brands about 8 years ago. It's kind of funny how my life has taken these turns every 8 years or so. Um, Questlove, I'm sorry, Black Thought wrote a book about life and how your body changes every 8 years, so then your mind and your career does too. I kind of have had that path. So about 7 8 years of representing artists, I had lunch with a friend, and I was explaining to him what was going on with my career. And he was kind of a music guy, but he was making some big transitions. And I was explaining to him that, every day I'm in the concrete jungle. It's kill or be killed. Like, listen, and I thought it was awesome. Like, I was just so in my own head of like what it's like to be a hip hop agent that this is just the game and this is what I'm signed up for. And he turned to me and said, "That sounds awful. Whatever you're doing, like, sounds scary." And I was like, what do you mean? This is the coolest job in the world. There's hundreds of people that want to represent these artists." And he said to me, "I think you need help." Like, and he was just doing meditation. He was just learning meditation. And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "All right, so you think this meditation thing could work?" And he's like, "You're not ready for meditation. You need therapy." And it kind of was a punch in the stomach because I'd always wanted to do therapy. My father is a therapist, and I'd never done it. And so growing up, I had never really used a therapist. I had my father, and I never really even considered personally being a candidate for therapy. And I looked into getting a therapist, got one, started working with a therapist. It was transformative pretty quickly. And I'm just a huge proponent of therapy and mental health. And with that, about 6 months, 8 months into therapy, I called Jesse again and was like, "Hey, this is great. Great recommendation. I'm ready. I told you I wanted this thing that you're talking about called meditation. I want this technology. I want this superpower. I want this edge. Let me get involved." And so he connected me with his um, meditation coach. Jesse Israel's gone on to be a really kind of prolific meditating teacher and communicator in the space. He organizes the Big Quiet. He just got off tour with Oprah. He works with a lot of brands. He's gone on to, his 10 years in the space is really paying off because he's one of the best out there and a real student of the craft. But he put me on to what he had known at the time, which was a meditating teacher named Light Watkins, who's also huge at this point. And I started studying with Light and learned meditation. And within about 3 months of meditating, I realized this is not what I want to do. I don't want to be representing the artists. I love music. I love the music business, but um, this is not where I want to be in 10 years. And I made a shift. I changed my business model. I rebranded my company to representing brands, and that's what I've been doing for the past 7 8 years is putting together music and brand partnerships and helping brands work in the music business and figure out the best way to work in music or work with musicians and navigate the complicated dynamic space. And I've, worked with some great brands over the years and some big explosive brands and some emerging brands, some cool startups. I work with all of them. I love it. I'll invest in companies I believe in. I'll help bring marketing services. I'll put artists in as investors to products. Shown products to or companies to ASAP Rocky and Rihanna, and they might not say what Rihanna said. She didn't want to be the face of the company, but she wanted to invest, and she put her own money into an app and company that we ended up selling to Nike. 18 months later, or sold to Nike 18 months later, which was just another win in how artists can support companies and startups. But yeah, the company, I think the deal that I'm working on right now that you referenced is with Slick Rick, the legendary hip hop artist from the 80s and 90s. Hasn't released a new album in 23 years, is working on his first project since then, first official release. And I've worked with him over the years and really have a strong liking to his manager, his wife, Mandy, and to him. And we were talking about brand partnerships opportunities and how to get brands involved. He was having a big moment at the Grammys 2 years ago. And I said, you got to come to this event. You got to come to this conference. We're going to put you in the right room where the right people are that make these decisions. And trust me, I'm going to interview you both. We'll put together a panel to talk about what you're working on, and take a risk. Fly to California with me, and let's see if we can drum up some brand partnerships. And in that room was the CEO of PacSun. And in that room was the head of entertainment partnerships for Roblox. And there was a bunch of other fantastic people in that room. But the two of them came up to me and to Rick and to Mandy and said, okay, let's try to figure something out. And which was just so out of the box. Slick Rick being an old school, traditional fashion kind of icon rapper, to do something with PacSun, which is so young and so Gen Z, and Roblox, which is like the next generation of gaming, was just not obvious, out of the box, unconventional, super creative, and brand extension. A cool collaboration idea. It was a way for PacSun to be involved in hip hop's 50th anniversary. It was a way for Roblox to do something in hip hop with an old school act, something different than normally do. And so basically the three partnerships, the three of us got together and fleshed out a plan where we're going to do a release in PacSun stores with physical merch. We're going to do digital release with an avatared version of Slick Rick, which is awesome looking, which will come out in a couple months this quarter. And Rick will be, you know, giving away digital chains and selling some virtual items, and tying it all together with one kind of joint effort from Rick, who's got his first album coming out in 23 years, which is going to be, a big anticipated moment for him, with Roblox, which is, I think, the platform of the year. Just a great place to connect with younger audience, a great place to premiere music, a great place to sell virtual items, and PacSun, which is this young, cool clothing brand that is just so not obvious, out of the box, and has just big reach. And I really like these three-way partnerships, and I really like the fact that you do something that's not obvious and just like something you wouldn't think about. And I love that we all got together on a human level at an event and kind of came up with this idea collectively. And so those are the type of partnerships that I'm really excited about, and working on day in, day out to kind of make sure it comes to life.
It's like you're living my dream. Do you ever, if you ever need an admin or some kind of, I mean, I'm your girl. I am your girl. So, and when I listen to you, Jesse, it just reinforces to me like the magic that you got going on. You have a lot of lightning in the in a bottle, but when you look at it from like an entrepreneurial standpoint, I know you've spoken many times to entrepreneurs and about entrepreneurs, but you are truly like a diamond in the rough, I think, when it comes to this type of thing, because you've got, going back to all the phone calls you were making, you have a relentless pursuit of whatever it is that's driving you, and you have a vision and a belief, and you already see it before it even happens, and you have a work ethic that is like can't won't don't stop. Like, I see all these, these skills and whatever, and there's no doubt that I see why you've been so successful. But what would you say to someone who's just starting out? They're an entrepreneur, and they're maybe you, 20 years ago. What do we tell these people in today's world, in terms of the brass tacks of how to go, how to move, how to make it happen?
I'd say a couple things that if you're starting out in your career that are big door openers and important to understand. One is on a base level, meditation is just such a powerful tool, and to understand that and to be able to sit in calmness and think allows so much to kind of become clear, and allows you to tap into your authentic self, which is just the most important frequency of all, is authenticity. Secondly, I would stress the value and the power of compounding. Compounding in all of its forms, compounding in knowledge, compounding in relationships, compounding in um, health, compounding in finance, understanding a long term mentality of all of these things a little bit better all add up to each like a larger force, and thinking long big picture is super important. And then the third tip I would give somebody starting out that wants to make it in a business like this or is an entrepreneur is to attach yourself to the biggest talent, if it's a brand, if it's an artist, as possible early on in your career, because it's a massive door opener. All of a sudden, rolling with the clips, I'm talking to Al Heyman, Live Nation, um, Tommy Hilfiger, uh, Jay Z, promoters, agents, managers. The whole industry kind of like came through my doors in the very early stages of my career because I was working with an act that was so big so fast. And so I just would highly stress, even if you're working at a big brand, start big. And then when you get to a place where you really understand the ropes, you've got relationships, you've got your footing, you've got experience, then you can figure out how to break free and create your own business and own IP and things of that nature. So that would be my suggestion, is like find the biggest artist name you can, executive you can, and just add as much value as possible, be a sponge, and try to hitch yourself to that star's wagon.
I love it. I love it so much. And I'm all juiced up. I'm all jacked up just from talking to you and listening to you. I could listen to you for hours. We almost have already talked for an hour.
It's just flying by. You're such a natural host. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
a
Just a
great
nap.
conversation.
It's all you. I'm just gonna like actually take myself out of this and just have you in it, because who needs me when you got Jesse, man? So you should
I
have.
love what
You
you're saying.
ever thought about having your own show? I mean, I know you're bored and you have a lot of free time, but I think you'd be great.
Well, what I have is a newsletter,
I I
and
I get it.
thank you.
I
That's
get
kind
it.
of my outlet right now. Is it's a music industry, music and brand newsletter with my own point of view. It's kind of like going to the Trends gym each week. I'll read 1,000 articles, I'll skim 1,000 articles, I'll read 100, I'll select 10 that then I'll share with my audience that I think
Yep.
will find interesting. And yeah, I mean, it's a great outlet for me to connect, and it's a serendipity bomb. Each week it goes out. You never know what's going to come in, who's going to email you off the back of it, who it's going to resonate with, how far it's going to travel. But it's been a consistent practice for me for about 5 years. And it's a great way for me to kind of broadcast without, and stay sharp. So if I wanted to develop something from there, if it was a podcast, if it was a live show, if it was an interview show, it would be natural for me because I already have an audience and I already have a practice of kind of like reading and studying trends and formulating a POV weekly. So that's
Yeah.
kind of been my creative outlet. And I do believe like writing is a way that you can kind of like outlive yourself because it stays around. So I kind of am having fun with my newsletter right now, but I don't
I
know if
love
you want to give me a show, we could talk about it.
I might actually want to produce your show. I need to spend more time with you. Well, Jesse, thank you so much. I appreciate you more than you'll know. And you know what? We're friends now. Just so you know.
Good.
You're not
We've
getting
been
rid
friends since we met. I'm like
you're,
Sinatra too. I never lose a friend.
you're not getting rid of me, buddy.
Awesome.
All right, Jesse. So next time I'm in Miami, I'm gonna look you up. We're gonna hang out. We're gonna meditate. We're gonna do all the things, and you're gonna give me all kind of zhuzh on how I can just be even more awesome.
I can't wait. I
All
don't
right,
think you need much help, but definitely it'll be fun to hang.
all right, buddy. Keep moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Peace.